So what are you ready to cut out of your life? Does that invitation sound intense? If so, I've modified this to be a little more lighter. And this also assists you in seeing what you might consider cutting out of your life and space. Now, of course, this is a little funny because scissors, material scissors, don't necessarily cut things out of our lives for us, but they do invoke and evoke a certain imagery of the ability to separate, to sever things. And in our case, I bring this forward as imagery as we contemplate in today's video, genuinely releasing and pruning things that are complete for us so that we can allow more resonant growth through. Because just like gardeners, when we prune things, we're actually assisting in the direction of growth, the direction of energy, which often helps the plant that is being pruned develop with more vigor, produce more buds, produce more fruits, so to speak. And in our own lives, when we're contemplating what to release, what to let go of, and auspiciously with the new year here, using the momentum of that in our inquiries as well, we give ourselves some opportunity to cultivate our own energy. Because letting go does not need to be a scary thing. It does not need to be something that we fight at, that we resist, that we force. It can be something that we choose to give ourselves in order to have, as mentioned, our most delightful experience of life, here and now. Now I'm Danielle Lynn, fellow master gardener, enjoyer of googly eyes, and someone who speaks with you about the intentional cultivation of your life experience. And in today's conversation, I have a few inspirations to share with you on this topic, and specifically some inspirations to share around the perspective of letting go. If there's something you're contemplating letting go of, I invite you to not explore it from the place of what you are going to lose, but to start getting curious about what you are going to receive. And in the beginning, what you'll receive is a lot of unknown. But what you will also receive is space. When we let go, we receive space and energy, so to speak. We receive that because whatever we have let go of, whatever was occupying that, now comes in space and energy. Now, this letting go is not something that happens just on a conceptual level. It's something that you do at an energetic level. The letting go must be energetic, otherwise you're still holding the thread on. One of the cooler things about remembering that you are a co-creator within this reality is the understanding that ultimately you don't gotta focus on things that don't matter to you. Any stories that you perpetuate about why you must do something often have an asterisk next to them that says, see appendices, right? In books, that means we go flip to the back to find the sources of why something is. And inside of ourselves, we have appendices as well. We often call these subconscious awarenesses. Although many times we may be satisfied to not check the sources. We might just hand wave it and go, oh yes, yes, of course. That is the way things are, and then proceed. Now this makes a lot of sense because if we consistently paused to check the sources, then from another level you might spend a lot of your time looking at the sources, which is a different kind of way to live one's life. However, I found a fairly effective way of knowing whether or not I'd like to check the appendices of something without necessarily stifling the flow and rhythm of my life. And it goes something like, if I find myself repeatedly making a choice that I appear to feel frustrated about or that I'm not enjoying, I might pause, take a look at the whys, W-H-Y-S, and get wise to why I am making the consistent choices that I am. Now, as you know, I invite us to do this from a place of not having shame, judgment, blame about the why that we find. For one, it's not specifically constructive, and for two, it actually diverts our energy from getting to the root and doing something constructive about it, with it, around it. If we're making our choices from our places of inner empowerment, then we can choose the way that we would like to interface with the life experience that we're having. Because a lot of people go through life really believing that they have no choice. You know, the paradox is that some people can say, you have a choice, you don't have a choice. Check this out. Pretty cool, huh? Did this drop of water have a choice coming onto my finger like this? Does a drop of water even have the cognizance to make a choice? Some might say that perhaps in that small snapshot, the drop of water didn't have a choice. Here I was, acting in volition, moving. The drop of water was simply suspended at the end of this point, and it was placed on my finger and then dropped back where it came. Some might say, from a wider perspective, perhaps at a place far beyond this moment, that choice was coordinated beyond time and space. And there was a choice that I made, a choice that that drop of water made, and a choice that we both made in that moment to come together. Even if at that particular now spot, the drop of water may have felt acted upon, if it had feelings. And in the same way, as we move through our human lives, we may feel acted upon. And I've spoken about this before, that it is important to remember, if you would like to involve importance in this, that we're making choices, not just as our human self, not just as our conscious self. We're making choices from a subconscious level, and we're making choices from levels beyond that. Now, if you would like to really enjoy the fruits of all those choices in the present moment, one of the things that I invite people to consider is that it's not that what's happening here, it's not that that matters. How you respond to it and connect with it in the present moment is what matters. Said it before, I'll likely say it again, and I'll likely say it again. What's happening around doesn't matter nearly as much as your response, as your interpretation, as your perspective on it, and whether or not you're placing focus on it. This is one of the reasons why in our conversations together, I invite us to cultivate our curiosity and our ability to be adaptable with perspectives. Because as we develop that particular skill set, right, you could compare it to if you wanted to be more flexible in your body, you're doing stretches, you're doing yoga. Well, this is like emotional and spiritual stretching in yoga. The ability to be curious and light with your perspective, the ability to observe what is happening. We're not disconnecting from what's happening in the world around us. But what we are doing is we're observing it without immediately deciding, well, this is what it means, this is the story, this is what it tells me about me or not, or this or that. Instead, we're able to be present with the information. If we're in a heightened emotional state, we're able to feel our feelings fully. once again, without needing to attach a big complicated story to it. And then once we are at a neutral point, or let's just say higher, then we're able to start evaluating the data. I invite us to all be kind to our minds, right? Our minds work with us. They work with us as we work with them, as we work with ourselves, as we develop discernment. It is possible for us to have systems and constructs in place where the mind doesn't appear to work with us so much. But that's not something it is doing out of, let's say, maliciousness. It's just what it's been programmed to do. And you have the ability, no matter how deep in it you are, to shift beyond. I say to people, even if there is, let's say, some form of external assistance that you could connect with that would help you, you still tap into that external assistance through the consent you give yourself internally. And in this way, you can remember how to work with the internal and external in harmony. It's not one favoring the other. It's understanding that you are an amalgamation of energy and of matter and of many other things. And so you have an amalgamation of resources available to you. And this is why, once again, we approach things with curiosity. And I'll even weave in there lateral thinking. Lateral thinking allows us to not just look at the options we have in front of us as the only options. It allows us to open up new pathways as to how things can be. Not for the purpose of trying to control the outcome, but for the decision of choosing the most fluid path from here. There's a subtle distinction there, right? It's valuable. As we're coming to this point in our juncture, you have an opportunity with the calendar year to evaluate. What did you really enjoy about the previous year? What did you enjoy? What was challenging? What was delightful? What do you feel ready to, let's say, trim from your life? Letting go, this is as easy as breathing out. You breathe in, and then you breathe out. That's letting in, that's letting go. Until we release the breath, we don't have an opportunity to take in more breath. But we have a certain knowing and a trust, most of the time anyway, that the other breath of air will be there, even as we let go of it. In the same way in our lives, as we begin to cultivate a relationship with reality, where we trust that the letting go is connected to the cycle of receiving anew, we start to develop an easier and easier and easier time with the process of release. And then we find release itself isn't an activity that you have to force, but it's a natural occurrence when you are in the momentum of trust with yourself and life. So I'll say this another way. Letting go isn't a manual thing that you have to figure out and convince yourself of and build up to. It's a natural symptom of cultivating certain energetic patterns, certain behavioral patterns, certain habitual patterns, certain, let's say, tapping in to your actual, genuine, natural self pattern that occurs. Because then it's no longer a question of having to let go of something. You simply have no desire to continue to connect with that thing because your focus is on what actually nourishes you. Now, that's not to say that you will never feel pain or challenge at letting go. It's just that I find, as your perception widens, you don't find yourself as upset of letting go of this thing when you understand at the same time that what you're letting in is this thing. A few of the steps that you can take right now in your life to explore this for yourself is you can start by taking a pen and paper and start listing out what matters to you in your life and world. Do so in a way where you give yourself complete permission to be authentic about it. Not the PR version, not what you think others want to hear or should hear or what you believe you should care about, but what you actually care about, which can be vastly different things. They can be vastly different things, my friend. After you've done this, you can then write a paper that says, this is the amount of enjoyment that I'm going to allow in my life and why. And then write out for each of the things you care about, this is how much I believe I'm allowed to have and why. This is a very interesting exercise because what you're identifying in this exercise is you're identifying where your potential blockers are for receiving. Because when we have blockers up for receiving, this is often where we'll find a little bit of, let's just say, challenge and letting go. Because one of the reasons we don't let go of things is because somewhere within us, we believe we won't get something better, of equivalent value or better. The challenge around letting go can be connected to a challenge around scarcity. So when you're bringing these things to the forefront, these activities that I'm suggesting, they're some of the tools that you can utilize when you're doing inner exploration, shadow work, as it's called. You can see I'm here in the shadow, only in part because, oh my God. We love the sun. We also love being here. As you do this exploratory work, you may be surprised at what you find. I invite you to be so playful, generous with yourself, curious with yourself. If you find things that feel uncomfortable, I would suggest this isn't the time to beat up on yourself. Imagine you were your own younger brother or sister or your own child. We genuinely encourage our inner child, our inner self to be expressive, because the more we encourage that, the more inspiration and information that part of ourselves will bring. If we suppress it and ignore it, it may start developing a behavior that's like, well, why bother? Right? I'm going to be suppressed and ignored. Imagine how you may act in that scenario. If you were in an organization and people in the organization were not listening to you, there may be a time that you have great ideas. You're like, well, I'm not going to bring it anyway. Why use my energy that way? But if you are shown respect and reciprocity, you will likely not only feel encouraged to share what you have, but new inspirations might come to you. And this is part of what happens as we do these kinds of exercises, like writing. This is one of the ways we can do it, but like inner inquiry, because we are reinforcing the healthy inner communication systems between our conscious self, our subconscious self, our expanded conscious self. We begin being the inner leaders, the inner coordinators that inspire all parts of ourselves to collaborate together. And as we do that, it's not an insistence that the inner parts of ourselves must get in line or change. It's a curiosity and a collaboration and a willingness to walk through the steps that it may take to get to a place where conversations can happen. Because again, you may find challenged parts of yourself. You may find wounded parts of yourself. You may find hyper parts of yourself. You may find all kinds of parts when you do this work. Now, interestingly enough, as you start coordinating like that self internally, imagine what happens as you start connecting with teams of people externally. The skills you develop internally assist you with the coordination around you. And people inherently, subconsciously, okay, all of our subconsciouses are talking while we're around us. People subconsciously recognize you as someone who wants to collaborate. Not someone who wants to oppress or manipulate or this, but someone who genuinely not only wants to collaborate, but in a way that is empowered for all involved, in a way that involves, let's say, insightful boundaries. And so, my friend, in today's video, I simply invite you to consider what I've shared thus far. To consider for yourself what you'd like to call forward in your life at this time, what you'd like to let go of, what feels complete. If you'd like to go deeper on this, I have several pathways. One, there's a resonance shift happening in the lab. So if you have not yet explored the lab, now is an excellent time. I have a link in the description. A resonance shift will be of great assistance to you if you are in the process of letting go. It is a 30-day embodied experience that has very profound effects. I will also be in New York in January for an in-person flow-enhancing experience. Some may choose to do both of these things. I invite you to check once again the description and see what calls to you. And in all other cases, please be invited to sign up for the Flow book. It's a resource that I have been handing to all those who sign up. My friend, I appreciate you. I appreciate our time together. And I look forward to our next conversation.